Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. If you're trying to get a handle on, well, everything that's changing our world right now, from the deepest secrets of the universe to why your orange juice costs so much, you've definitely come to the right place. We've sifted through a massive stack of global news reports today. We're going deep on new telescope discoveries revealing the universe's early days. Then we're looking at geopolitical friction heating up across, well, at least 3 continents. And of course, we have to talk about technology, the dizzying pace of it all. New browsers, AI, and this really concerning question about whether we can even trust artificial intelligence anymore.
It's a huge amount to cover, definitely. We're jumping from, the scale of cosmology right down to the nitty-gritty of market swings and really sensitive diplomatic talks. Our mission today, like always, is to try and weave all these complex threads together, synthesize these global stories, which often seem to conflict, into something clear, something you can actually use. We're really focusing on the hard science and the big geopolitical shifts that are actively redrawing the map as we speak.
That is a very big map. So let's dive in where the scale is just.
Well, it's mind-boggling. Section 1, the new cosmos. We're talking deep space, weird chemistry, and even ice on Mars.
Sounds good. Let's start way out there.
I always find looking up really helps put everything else in perspective. It's kind of hard to stress about, say, market volatility when you hear what the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST, is capturing now. We've got a report saying it just delivered this stunning new view of the Hubble Ultra Deep Field. That's right. And it's more than just a pretty picture, spectacular as it is. This really signifies a profound leap in our ability to see. The JWST use 2 key instruments here. MERI, that's the mid-infrared instrument, and their RCAM, the near-infrared camera. These tools basically let it capture light that's been traveling for billions of years, stretched out by the expansion of the universe. It's like a time machine, in a way.
Right, the Hubble Ultra Deep Field already showed us thousands of galaxies, which is incredible back then. So if JWST is looking even deeper, what's the specific scientific goal? I mean, why are these particular infrared cameras so important?
Well, the big goal is to actually see the first generation of galaxies forming. Because the universe is expanding, the light from the most distant, earliest objects gets shifted into the infrared part of the spectrum. That's redshift. So MERI and ANRCAM are specifically designed to pick up this ancient, stretched light. They can peer through the cosmic dust that obscures visible light. By seeing these infant galaxies in all sorts of stages of development, the aim is to fundamentally rewrite our understanding of how galaxies actually formed and how the very early universe evolved.
So we're talking about looking back to when the universe was maybe just a few 100 million years old.
Exactly. Trying to piece together how that, chaotic early soup of matter somehow organized itself into the huge cosmic structures we see all around us today. It's fundamental cosmology.
Wow. That really is pushing the boundaries. Speaking of things that challenge our understanding, let's talk black holes, but maybe not the usual kind. There's this, frankly, bizarre idea astronomers are looking into now, stars that might actually have black holes hiding inside them at their cores.
Yeah, they're calling them black hole stars. It's a wild concept, isn't it?
It really is.
It suggests that the inner workings of some stars aren't just fusion, but might be influenced or even driven by these incredibly dense objects. We're talking about observing stars showing really weird behavior, maybe strange pulsations, or density profiles that just don't make sense with standard models. It suggests something extremely heavy and compact is lurking deep inside.
But how would a black hole even get inside a star without just, instantly tearing it apart? The report mentions a couple of ideas.
Precisely. It's a puzzle. The first hypothesis involves primordial black holes.
Primordial, meaning from the very beginning.
Exactly. These aren't formed from collapsing stars like the ones we usually talk about.
Right.
They're theoretical objects that might have formed almost instantly after the Big Bang, just from tiny, super dense regions in that incredibly hot early universe.
Okay.
If these primordial black holes exist, and if some are small enough, they could theoretically have been captured by forming stars way back then, settling into the core without causing immediate destruction, just sort of sitting there.
Huh. And the second idea?
The second possibility is maybe even weirder. It suggests these are remnants of really massive stars that underwent a kind of internal collapse. Instead of blowing up in a huge supernova and leaving behind a black hole or neutron star that we could see,
Right.
they might have collapsed only at the very core, sort of imploding inwardly. The star's outer layers could potentially remain intact, essentially hiding the black hole within.
That's difficult to picture.
It is. But what's really exciting here is the bigger picture implication. This research, if it pans out, could give us clues about how the supermassive black holes, the absolute monsters, at the centers of galaxies, got started in the first place.
How so?
Well, if these black hole stars exist, especially the primordial kind, they can act as the seeds. Tiny black holes that gradually grew over billions of years by accreting matter, eventually becoming the supermassive ones we see anchoring entire galaxies. It's a potential answer to a major astrophysical mystery.
Truly mind-bending stuff. Okay, let's come a little closer to home, astronomically speaking. From the colossal scale of black holes to some really weird, tiny-scale chemistry happening out on Saturn's moon, Titan.
Titan, always fascinating.
It's a top target for astrobiology, right? Looking for life or the conditions for it. And apparently its chemistry is even more complex than we realized.
Indeed. New research shows some really bizarre chemical interactions happening in Titan's extremely cold environment. It turns out that molecules of methane and ethane, the stuff that makes up its lakes and rivers—
Liquid methane rivers still blows my mind.
Right. Well, these liquid molecules can apparently infiltrate the solid crystal structure of frozen hydrogen cyanide.
Wait, hang on. Frozen hydrogen cyanide and liquid methane mixing with it. Can you just remind us what Titan's environment is actually like? It's not exactly Earth-like.
Not at all. Titan is unique in the solar system. It has this thick, smoggy atmosphere, mostly nitrogen, thicker than Earth's, actually. And it has a weather cycle, but with liquid methane and ethane instead of water. Temperatures are frigid, around minus 179 degrees Celsius or minus 290 Fahrenheit.
Okay, so incredibly cold.
Extremely cold. So you have these solid materials like frozen hydrogen cyanide forming crystals.
Right.
Think of it like ice crystals, but made of cyanide. The discovery is that the liquid methane and ethane, which act as solvents in that environment, can actually seep into the organized structure, the lattice of this frozen solid.
And why does that matter for finding life?
It matters because it opens up completely new possibilities for complex chemistry. Prebiotic chemistry, the steps leading towards life, might happen in ways we haven't imagined, ways that don't rely on water, like life on Earth does.
Oh.
If these liquids can get inside solid structures and interact, it means you could potentially form more complex, organized molecules, maybe even membranes or something similar, in this incredibly alien cryogenic environment. It forces us to think way outside the box about where and how life could potentially originate. It doesn't have to be H2O based.
Fascinating. Okay, one more stop in the solar system before we head back to Earthbound tech.
Yeah.
Mars. There's potentially good news for future astronauts regarding water. A new theory suggests ancient volcanoes might be responsible for ice deposits near the Martian equator.
Yes, this is potentially very significant for future exploration. The idea is that some ancient Martian volcanic eruptions weren't like Hawaiian lava flows, but incredibly explosive, like Mount St. Helens or Pinatubo on Earth, but maybe even bigger.
Okay, violent eruptions.
They're very violent. They would have blasted enormous amounts of gas, water vapor, and ash high into the thin Martian atmosphere. This sudden injection of material could have temporarily changed the climate, maybe created a brief greenhouse effect or extensive cloud cover, allowing snow or frost to fall and accumulate as ice.
And why is finding ice near the equator such a big deal? We know there's ice at the poles, right?
We do, but the poles are incredibly difficult places to operate. They're extremely cold, energy-intensive, prone to massive dust storms, and have long periods of darkness. The equator is much more manageable.
Logistically better.
Exactly. Better sunlight for solar power, more moderate temperatures, easier landing sites. If there are substantial deposits of water ice, which you need for drinking, growing food, even making rocket fuel through electrolysis readily accessible near the equator, it completely changes the game for establishing a long-term human presence. It drastically reduces the energy needed and simplifies the whole setup for a potential base or colony.
So ancient volcanic chaos on Mars might actually make it a more hospitable place for us in the future.
It's a definite possibility this research points towards. Makes you rethink Mars's history.
It certainly does. And that idea of past chaos shaping future possibilities is actually a neat transition to our next section. Because while the cosmos follows rules billions of years old, the rules shaping our digital lives seem to change almost constantly. Okay. Let's shift gears from Martian geology to something closer to home. The battle for your computer screen. The browser wars. It often feels like Google Chrome just won, right? It has something like, what, 66% market share? Safari is a distant second, around 16%.
Yeah, Chrome's dominance has been pretty staggering for years, but the sources we're seeing suggest that perception might be a bit dated. The battle is actually heating up again, and it's being driven by users demanding different things now.
Like what are people looking for beyond just loading web pages?
Primarily, it seems to be privacy and performance. We're seeing alternatives like Mozilla Firefox, Microsoft Edge, Brave, and Opera gaining real traction. People are actively seeking out features like Brave's built-in ad and tracker blocking, which can significantly speed things up and enhance privacy.
I've heard good things about Brave's privacy focus.
Exactly. And Firefox has always been strong on robust privacy settings and user customization. Plus, AI is starting to creep in, personalizing the experience, suggesting content, summarizing pages. That's becoming a factor too.
And speaking of AI and browsers, the big news is a major new player entering the field, OpenAI. They've launched their own browser called Atlas.
Yes, Atlas. And this isn't just another niche browser. It's built on Chromium, same open source foundation as Chrome and Edge, so it's robust. But the key is OpenAI integrating its generative AI capabilities directly into the browsing experience.
How did the market react? Google can't be thrilled.
Not at all. Alphabet stock, Google's parent company, actually dipped right after the announcement. Investors see this as a potential threat not just to Chrome's market share, but potentially to Google's core business search. If OpenAI can capture users at the browser level, integrating search and AI answers seamlessly.
It bypasses Google search, potentially.
That's the concern. And this launch comes at a time when OpenAI is already a tech giant. They recently had that huge share sale valuing the company at an eye-watering $500 billion, fueled by partnerships like the one with Microsoft.
But launching a browser, especially one so tightly linked to AI, isn't just about market share or stock prices, is it? There are immediate red flags around ethics and just how reliable this technology actually is.
Absolutely. The timing is crucial. Atlas arrives right in the middle of intense global debate and, frankly, criticism about the ethics of AI. We're talking data privacy, how user data is collected and used by the browser and the AI, the potential for spreading misinformation.
Especially if the AI is generating summaries or answers directly in the browser.
Precisely. OpenAI is already under the microscope from regulators worldwide because of past issues around transparency, bias in its models, and data usage. Putting AI right at the front end of the consumer web experience through Atlas means they're going to face even more scrutiny. They really need to navigate this carefully.
And that scrutiny seems incredibly justified, especially in light of this major new study that paints a pretty grim picture of AI reliability. This data is, well, it's stark.
It is damning, frankly, and it should make anyone relying on AI for information pause and think. This was a huge collaborative study by 22 international public broadcasters. We're talking major players like Germany's DW, the BBC, the European Broadcasting Union, EDO.
Okay, credible sources. What did they find?
They tested the big AI chatbots, ChatGPT, Microsoft's Copilot, Google's Gemini, and Perplexity specifically on how accurately they represent news information. The headline finding: these AI models misrepresented news nearly 45% of the time.
Wow, almost half the time. That's not just occasional errors, that sounds systemic. How is that even possible given the billions invested in these large language models, these LLMs?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? It
Yeah.
points to a fundamental ongoing problem with grounding these models in factual reality. The study looked at several things: accuracy, sourcing, context, distinguishing fact from opinion. The biggest single problem: sourcing.
What does that mean, sourcing issues?
It means in 31% of all the responses they checked, the AI either cited a source that didn't actually support the claim it was making, attributed information incorrectly, or just completely fabricated a source.
The hallucination problem we keep hearing about?
Exactly. It's hallucinating references. Accuracy itself, just getting the facts plain wrong, was the issue about 20% of the time.
Were there any specific examples in the report that really stand out, things that show how badly wrong they can go?
Yes, and some are quite shocking because they're easily verifiable facts. For instance, the AI called Perplexity stated incorrectly that surrogacy is illegal in Czechia. It isn't.
Okay, that's a factual error with real-world implications.
Definitely. Even more jarring, ChatGPT apparently reported that Pope Francis was still the current pope several months after his widely reported death. That shows a fundamental failure to grasp current events or update its knowledge base correctly.
But the base...
It is. The study also singled out Google's Gemini, saying it had the highest rate of significant problems overall, with sourcing issues plaguing a massive 76% of its responses in their tests.
76% for Google's flagship AI.
According to this study, yes. It suggests that even with massive resources, the connection between generating fluent language and retrieving accurate, verifiable information is still deeply flawed.
So what's the takeaway? The broadcasters who did the study, the EBU and BBC, they must have had recommendations.
They issued a pretty strong call to action. They urged the tech companies OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Perplexity to make reducing these errors an absolute top priority. And critically, they called for much greater transparency, suggesting the company should regularly publish performance data on accuracy and sourcing.
Which seems reasonable. If we can't trust these tools on basic facts, especially when they're being integrated into everything from search engines to browsers like Atlas, it raises a huge question. Are we automating knowledge, or are we just building incredibly efficient misinformation machines?
That's the core fear, especially when these tools are used to synthesize complex topics like global news or politics, shaping public understanding and opinion. The potential for large-scale automated misinformation is quite chilling.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, staying with technology's impact, let's look at how AI is reshaping corporations themselves. Starting with a huge shift happening at General Motors GM, they seem to be going all in on automation.
They're making a massive strategic pivot. AI and automated driving are becoming central to GM's entire future identity. They're showcasing this tech in their flagship electric Cadillac Escalade IQ, but the plan goes much further.
How so?
By 2028, GM aims to roll out what they're calling an eyes-off, hands-off driving system across many of their models. This relies heavily on the technology developed by Cruise, their autonomous vehicle subsidiary.
Eyes off, hands off. Can you break that down? What level of automation are we talking about in the standard SAE levels, Society of Automotive Engineers?
Right, the SAE levels, eyes off, hands off, puts them firmly into level 3, possibly aiming for level 4 conditional automation. Level 3 means the car handles most driving tasks under specific conditions, like on a highway. But the human driver needs to be ready to take back control fairly quickly if needed.
Okay.
Level 4 means the car is fully autonomous within a defined operational design domain, like a specific geographic area or certain weather conditions, and doesn't require human intervention within that domain. Achieving this reliably requires incredibly sophisticated sensor suites, LiDAR, radar, cameras, and powerful AI, using machine learning to process vast amounts of data for real-time decision-making. The goal is to remove the need for the driver to pay attention for extended periods, at least on highways initially.
So billions flowing into developing this AI at GM. But at the same time, we're seeing reports that AI is having a very different immediate impact on the human workforce in the tech sector itself. Layoffs.
Yes, this is the other side of the coin, the double-edged sword of AI advancement. We have reports that Salesforce, despite posting strong financial results, recently laid off around 4,000 employees.
4,000, wow.
Yeah, and analysts are pointing to the increasing efficiency and capability of AI tools in handling tasks previously done by humans, particularly in sales, marketing, and customer service roles, core areas for Salesforce. It highlights that AI-driven job displacement isn't just a future prediction, it's happening now, even in profitable companies.
And it's not just Salesforce, right? Meta, Facebook's parent company, also had cuts.
That's right. Meta cut about 600 jobs, specifically within its AI research division, FAIR, which stands for Fairness, Accountability, Transparency, and Ethics.
Wait, they cut jobs in the ethics division of their AI unit, while reportedly struggling with their latest AI model, Llama 4. That seems significant.
It does send a rather stark message, doesn't it? When a company facing challenges with its core AI development cuts jobs from the very team tasked with overseeing its safety, fairness, and ethical implications, it raises serious questions about priorities.
It suggests that, perhaps, when push comes to shove, financially or developmentally, the ethical considerations might be seen as, well, expendable, or at least downsized.
That's certainly a valid interpretation.
Yeah.
It highlights the tension between the race to innovate and deploy powerful AI and the resources dedicated to ensuring it's done responsibly. Especially when market pressures are intense, those ethical guardrails might be the first thing to face budget cuts.
A worrying trend. Okay, quickly touching on regulation and risk before we move to geopolitics. The UK's competition watchdog, the Competition and Markets Authority, or CMA, is looking at Apple.
Yes, the CMA is considering forcing Apple to allow third-party app stores on iPhones and iPads. This is part of a broader global push by regulators to tackle the perceived duopoly of Apple's iOS App Store and Google's Play Store.
What's the argument for forcing Apple to open up?
The CMA argues it would increase competition, potentially leading to lower app prices or commissions for developers, more consumer choice, and fostering innovation by allowing different kinds of app stores with different rules or focuses. It's fundamentally about challenging Apple's control over the ecosystem on its devices and addressing concerns about monopoly power in the digital market.
Okay. And sticking with the UK, but shifting from digital markets to physical disruption, this Jaguar Land Rover hack sounds absolutely devastating.
It was a massive incident. The estimated cost is around £2.1 billion, making it reportedly the most expensive single cyber attack in UK history. It didn't just steal data, it crippled their operations. Manufacturing was halted, and it had knock-on effects impacting over 5,000 suppliers.
£2.1 billion. That's staggering. But the report mentions something beyond just the cost, a shift in why hackers are doing this.
Exactly. That's the crucial takeaway, highlighted by the Cyber Monitoring Center report analyzing the attack. They warn that we're seeing a strategic shift in major cyber attacks. It's moving beyond just stealing data from IT systems. Credit card numbers, intellectual property.
Right, the traditional stuff.
The new focus is increasingly on disrupting operational technology, the OT systems that control physical processes. Think factory machinery, power grids, water treatment plants, logistics systems.
So actually stopping things from working.
Precisely. The goal is disruption, causing immediate tangible chaos and financial damage. Shutting down a production line or interfering with a critical utility creates instant leverage for extortion or causes massive economic harm. The JLR attack is seen as a prime example of this OT-focused strategy. Companies now need to worry just as much about protecting their physical operations from cyber threats as they do about protecting their data.
That's a fundamental shift in cybersecurity thinking. Okay, that focus on disruption and control is a perfect bridge to our next section, looking at global geopolitics, where things seem particularly tense right now. Let's move into the complex world of geopolitics. And starting with the relationship between the US and Russia, which seems, well, stalled. President Trump apparently postponed planned talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. They were maybe going to meet in Budapest.
That's the report, yes. President Trump cited not wanting a wasted meeting as the reason for the postponement. The diplomatic chatter, both from Washington, D.C. and Moscow, suggests the two leaders are just not on the same page right now. Different wavelengths was the phrase used.
And that's hindering any progress on key issues.
It seems so. Things like arms control negotiations, cooperation on regional security hotspots, counterterrorism efforts. Progress seems stalled because there isn't enough common ground or perhaps trust to even hold productive high-level talks. President Trump's comments suggest he's looking for tangible outcomes, not just a photo opportunity or maybe avoiding a meeting that could be politically difficult back home.
How did Russia react to the postponement? Did the Kremlin offer a reason?
Well, a Kremlin aide put forward their interpretation. They suggested the delay was forced by what they call a pro-war political elite within the United States, accusing this group of spreading disinformation specifically to sabotage any potential dialogue between Trump and Putin.
Blaming internal U.S. politics.
Whether that's accurate or just political spin, it certainly signals that the relationship is very strained, and the domestic political climate in the U.S. likely makes any perceived conciliation towards Russia very difficult for the administration right now.
That backdrop of tension is obviously playing out most acutely in Ukraine. We saw reports of two major escalations almost back-to-back.
Yes, very significant developments. First, Ukraine reported a successful strike deep inside Russia, hitting the Bryansk chemical plant. This facility is apparently crucial for producing gunpowder, explosives, and components for rocket fuel.
And they used Western weapons for that.
They reportedly used UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles. This demonstrates a sophisticated capability to reach strategic targets far behind the front lines, directly impacting Russia's ability to sustain its war effort. It's a major strategic blow.
But then there was immediate retaliation from Russia.
Hours later, yes, Russia launched a wave of drone and missile attacks against several Ukrainian cities. Tragically, these strikes killed at least 6 people and caused widespread power outages, particularly hitting regions like Chernihiv in northern Ukraine.
Knocking out power right as winter approaches.
It's a brutal tactic. It aims to demoralize the population and cripple infrastructure, making life unbearable for civilians by cutting off heat, light, and water. The reports coming out of places like Chernihiv, talking about people, including war widows, trying to cope without power, really drive home the devastating human cost of these retaliatory strikes.
It's just horrific, day after day. Shifting back to the military hardware side, what's the latest on international support for Ukraine? Are weapons still flowing in?
It's a mixed picture. Ukrainian President Zelensky was recently in Sweden, actively negotiating to acquire Swedish-made Gripen fighter jets. This highlights Ukraine's urgent need for modern aircraft to challenge Russia's air dominance.
So, seeking more advanced jets.
Yes. But on the other hand, we also saw Canada formally cancel a previously announced $250 million contract. This deal was supposed to refurbish a number of armored personnel carriers for Ukraine.
So one ally steps up potential support, another pulls back on a previous commitment.
Exactly. It shows the ongoing volatility and sometimes uncertainty surrounding military aid. While core allies remain committed, domestic politics, budget constraints, or policy shifts in supporting countries can still impact the flow of necessary equipment.
Okay, let's pivot now to the Middle East. There's a ceasefire in Gaza, but reports emphasize it's incredibly fragile. How is it holding?
U.S. Vice President Vance described the deal as going better than expected, which offers a sliver of cautious optimism in a situation that remains extremely tense and volatile.
It's still incredibly difficult, especially around the hostages and aid.
Absolutely. There was the heartbreaking news that the bodies of 2 more Israeli captives were returned as part of the process, Arya Zalmanovich and Master Sergeant Tamir Anar. These moments underscore the deep trauma and pain involved.
And the humanitarian situation in Gaza itself remains dire. There was a ruling from the International Court of Justice, the ICJ.
Yes, the ICJ, the UN's top court, issued a significant ruling. It essentially ordered Israel to allow aid from UNRWA, that's the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, into Gaza immediately to address the catastrophic humanitarian needs. The court stressed the urgency of getting food, water, and medical supplies in.
How did Israel respond to that ICJ order?
Israel's ambassador to the UN strongly condemned the ruling, calling it shameful. The Israeli position remains that UNRWA is compromised, alleging infiltration by Hamas operatives, and therefore cannot be trusted with aid distribution in Gaza.
But did the court address that claim?
It did. The ICJ specifically noted in its ruling that Israel had failed to provide sufficient evidence to the court to substantiate its broad claims about widespread Hamas infiltration within UNRWA impacting aid delivery. So you have this fundamental clash, a legal obligation versus deep mistrust and security concerns.
A real impasse. And VP Vance is in the region.
He is, but his office clarified his visit isn't just about overseeing the ceasefire day to day. He pushed back on the idea he was there to babysit it. The focus is apparently broader, on longer-term diplomatic strategies for the region beyond the immediate truce.
Okay, got it. Let's wrap this section with a quick look at some other diplomatic hotspots and shifting alliances. Starting in the Americas, what's happened between the U.S. and Colombia? Sounds like a major fallout.
It's quite dramatic. President Trump ordered a cutoff of all U.S. payments and subsidies to Colombia. This came after Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, who comes from a more left-leaning perspective, publicly criticized recent U.S. military operations in the Caribbean.
Criticized U.S. military actions, and the response was to cut off all aid.
Apparently so. It seems President Petro's comments, likely related to anti-drug operations or perceived U.S. interference, crossed a line for the Trump administration, leading to this very severe economic response. Billions in aid and subsidies are potentially affected.
How did Colombia react to having its aid cut?
President Petro responded immediately by recalling Colombia's ambassador from Washington, D.C. This signifies a major diplomatic rupture between two countries that have historically been close partners, particularly on security and counter-narcotics. It's a significant breakdown over national sovereignty and foreign policy disagreements.
Wow. Okay, moving across the Pacific, Japan has a new prime minister, Sanae Takaichi. First woman in the role, but she's facing criticism already.
That's right. Takaichi takes office pledging national renewal, a common theme for new leaders. However, critics, particularly from Japan's political left and perhaps some regional neighbors, are concerned about her policy direction. They argue she's pushing Japan towards deeper alignment with U.S. military strategy.
Specifically how?
The criticism centers on her perceived enthusiasm for closer ties with the AUKUS Security Pact, that's the Australia-UK-US deal, focused on countering China, and her well-known desire to revise Japan's post-World War II pacifist constitution to allow for a more assertive military. While she frames it as strengthening Japan's own defense, critics see it as potentially increasing regional tensions and making Japan more dependent on U.S. strategic goals in the Indo-Pacific.
Interesting dynamic. And finally, just before a major regional summit, North Korea made its presence felt.
As they often do, North Korea fired what are described as unidentified ballistic missiles into the waters off its east coast towards the East Sea or Sea of Japan.
And the timing is significant.
Highly significant. This happened just a week before South Korea is set to host the APEC summit, that's the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum. Critically, both President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are expected to attend and meet there.
So North Korea is sending a message just before the big meeting.
Absolutely. Analysts see this missile launch as a classic North Korean move. It's a calculated provocation designed to ensure Pyongyang isn't ignored, to reinforce its status as a nuclear-capable power, and to remind everyone, especially the U.S. and China, that North Korea remains a critical factor in regional security that cannot be sidelined, whatever the main agenda of the EPEC summit might be. They're forcing themselves onto the diplomatic table.
Always masters of timing, it seems. It's clear that diplomatic channels are strained globally, while military and economic pressures seem to be ramping up everywhere.
Okay, let's dive into the global economy now. It feels like a real mixed bag out there. In the UK, for example, there was a bit of relief maybe. Inflation slowed down, but maybe not as much as hoped. It's still at 3.8%.
That's right. Headline inflation easing slightly is technically good news for the government ahead of budget discussions and for the Bank of England potentially pausing interest rate hikes. But for the average person doing their grocery shopping, that 3.8% figure probably feels abstract.
Yeah, because the price of basic stuff still feels incredibly high. The report highlights something called the orange juice canary.
Exactly. It's being used as this, well, almost absurd symbol of persistent food inflation. The price of a standard carton of orange juice has apparently hit something like £5.30 in some UK supermarkets.
£5.30 for orange juice?
Yeah.
Seriously, why orange juice specifically?
Because its price surge perfectly illustrates the multiple pressures hitting food costs right now. It's not just one thing. You've got ongoing supply chain kinks, you've got rising energy costs impacting everything from transport to processing.
Right.
And critically, you have climate change impacts. Poor harvests, particularly for oranges in key growing regions like Brazil and Florida due to weather issues or disease, have drastically reduced supply. So even as general inflation cools a bit, staples like orange juice, butter, chocolate, coffee, milk, they're all still facing these complex overlapping pressures that keep prices painfully high for consumers.
So the canary in the coal mine for food prices is orange juice. Got it. Okay, shifting to investments. We saw a pretty dramatic drop in the metals market recently. Gold and silver took a hit.
A significant hit, yes. Gold and silver experienced their largest single-day percentage drop in quite some time, possibly years.
Yeah.
Gold fell around 8% off its recent peak. This effectively put a stop to the massive rally we'd seen in precious metals over the preceding months.
Why the sudden drop? What caused the sentiment to shift so quickly?
Analysts are pointing to a couple of main factors. First, simple profit-taking. The rally had been so strong for so long, many large institutional investors likely decided it was time to lock in those gains, creating selling pressure.
Makes sense.
Second, there might have been a subtle shift in overall market sentiment. Maybe slightly less fear about global risks, or perhaps investors saw better opportunities in other assets that day. But the primary driver seems to have been technical selling after such a strong run-up.
Now, when we talk about gold and market volatility, we have to mention Gerald Celente. He's a well-known trend forecaster, often with quite provocative takes. What's his view on this?
Celente definitely doesn't shy away from big predictions. He sees this recent pullback in metals as just noise within a much larger trend. He's on record forecasting, well, nothing less than the eventual decline of the U.S. as the dominant global power, the end of the U.S. empire, as he puts it.
Wow, okay.
And linked to that, he predicts an inevitable, massive, long-term rise in the price of gold as global faith in the U.S. dollar and fiat currencies generally diminishes. But he also offers a stark warning about the tech sector right now.
What's his tech prediction?
He forecasts a major crash in the artificial intelligence market. He draws direct parallels to the dot-com bubble of the late 90s, arguing that current AI valuations are completely detached from actual profitability or sustainable business models. He thinks we're in an AI bubble that's bound to burst.
So, long gold, short AI, essentially. A very contrarian view compared to current market hype.
Extremely contrarian on the AI front, yes. It certainly gives investors something different to think about amidst all the enthusiasm.
Definitely. Okay, let's look at some specific companies facing financial friction. Netflix had a rough patch.
They did. Their shares took a significant tumble after their latest earnings report, disappointed investors. And the surprising reason wasn't really about subscriber growth or hit shows. It was a sudden, unexpected tax dispute with Brazil.
A tax dispute? How much are we talking?
Reportedly around $600 million. This dispute hit their bottom line and, more importantly, spooked investors about the potential for similar regulatory or tax risks cropping up in other international markets. It highlights the operational complexities global companies face, especially in large developing economies with evolving regulations.
600 million is a big surprise. Meanwhile, in France, a very well-known, almost iconic company is asking the public for help.
Yes, the glass company Duralex. They're famous worldwide for those incredibly tough, virtually unbreakable Picardy tumblers and Lies bowls you see everywhere. They've been making them since 1945.
Oh yeah, I know those glasses. They're struggling.
They are. The company is publicly urging French consumers to buy their products to help them survive. They're facing a perfect storm of soaring energy costs. Making glass is very energy-intensive and intense price competition from cheaper foreign imports. It's a classic example of a heritage brand with higher domestic production costs struggling to compete in a globalized market.
A tough situation. And sticking with global competition, trade tensions over essential materials seem to be escalating again, particularly around rare earths.
That's right. China has agreed to hold crisis talks with the European Union in Brussels. The issue is China's tightening restrictions on the export of rare earth minerals.
And those are critical for
All sorts of high-tech manufacturing. Electric vehicles, wind turbines, smartphones, advanced electronics, defense systems. Europe is heavily reliant on China for these materials. Companies like Nexperia, a major Dutch chip maker, are feeling the pinch from these export controls.
So Brussels wants China to ease up. Essentially, yes. They're looking for more predictability and security of supply. Meanwhile, we also have U.S. and Chinese trade officials scheduled to meet in Malaysia, just before that big APEC summit we mentioned earlier. These rare earth tensions and broader trade frictions will definitely be on their agenda too. Resource nationalism is becoming a major factor in geopolitics.
It really seems to be. But maybe the most profound shift in the global financial landscape, connecting back to Salente's point about the dollar, is happening in Brazil with their PIX payment system. This sounds revolutionary.
PIX is genuinely transformative, and it's crucial to understand its geopolitical significance, not just its convenience. It was launched by Brazil's central bank back in 2020. It allows for instant free money transfers between people, businesses, even government entities, 247.
Instant and free. How does it work without banks or card networks taking a cut? It operates through QR codes or user aliases like phone numbers or email addresses linked directly to bank accounts or digital wallets, completely bypassing the traditional credit debit card infrastructure and its associated fees. It's state-backed infrastructure. And adoption has been explosive. Pix now handles something like half of all financial transactions in Brazil.
Half! That's incredible market penetration in just a few years. What's been the impact domestically?
Massive. It's dramatically increased financial inclusion, bringing millions of previously unbanked Brazilians into the formal financial system because it's so easy and free to use. It's also been a huge boon for small businesses, slashing the transaction fees they used to pay to card companies. It's widely seen as a major domestic success story.
Okay, so it sounds fantastic for Brazilians. Why is it causing tension with the United States, as the reports suggest?
Because, from the perspective of the Trump administration, systems like PIX represent a fundamental challenge to the existing global financial order, which is largely centered around the U.S. dollar and U.S.-controlled payment networks like SWIFT.
How so? How does a domestic Brazilian system challenge the dollar?
Because PIX demonstrates that a large economy can operate a highly efficient, instant digital payment system without relying on the traditional, often U.S.-dominated financial intermediaries. The fear is that this model could be replicated elsewhere, potentially creating alternative payment rails that bypass the dollar system entirely, especially for international trade.
So it's seen as a potential blueprint for de-dollarization efforts.
Exactly. And Brazil isn't keeping PIX purely domestic. They're actively exploring cross-border applications and linking up with similar instant payment systems being developed in other countries, including potentially through initiatives like BRICS Pay among the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and new members.
So the U.S. reaction was?
The Trump administration responded quite aggressively, imposing hefty 50% tariffs on certain Brazilian goods and placing sanctions on some Brazilian officials allegedly involved. The stated reasons were around unfair trading practices, but many analysts interpret it as a direct geopolitical response to PIX, framing it as a contest over the future of digital finance and monetary sovereignty.
So the U.S. is essentially trying to discourage other countries from following Brazil's lead in creating independent, state-backed digital payment systems.
That appears to be the underlying strategic concern. If countries can conduct large volumes of trade and domestic transactions instantly and freely outside the reach of U.S. financial oversight, or the potential for U.S. sanctions cutting them off from SWIFT, it significantly erodes U.S. geopolitical leverage that comes from controlling the plumbing of global finance. Pix isn't just a payment app. It's potentially a weapon in a brewing global conflict over monetary power.
That is a really profound shift to watch. The infrastructure of money itself becoming a geopolitical battleground. All right, let's move into our final section, looking at climate impacts and some serious social issues, from organized crime to public health. And the first climate indicator is, well, it's just bizarre, mosquitoes in Iceland.
It sounds like something out of a weird science fiction story, but it's reportedly true. For the first time in recorded history, mosquitoes have been found establishing themselves in Iceland. This is a place famously known for being one of the very few mosquito-free environments on Earth.
Why now? What's changed?
The timing is directly linked to a period of record-breaking warmth in Iceland and the surrounding North Atlantic region. The warmer temperatures are apparently now allowing mosquito larvae to survive the winters and complete their life cycle, something that just wasn't possible before in Iceland's typically harsh climate.
Wow, that's such a clear physical sign of warming. What are the immediate concerns now that they're there?
Well, there's the immediate nuisance factor, of course. But the bigger concerns are ecological disruption. What impact will this new predator have on Iceland's existing ecosystems? And, more critically, public health.
How so? Mosquito-borne diseases.
Exactly. Iceland has never had to deal with mosquito-borne illnesses like West Nile virus, Zika, dengue fever, or others. Their public health system isn't set up for it, the population has no immunity, and doctors aren't trained to look for these diseases. The arrival of mosquitoes, driven by climate change, introduces a completely new and potentially serious long-term health risk that they now have to prepare for and monitor very closely.
A stark example of climate change's unexpected consequences. On a more positive environmental note, there's a story from the Peruvian Amazon about bees getting legal rights.
Yes, specifically the Amazonian stingless bees. In what's being called a significant environmental justice victory, these bees have been granted legal rights to exist, thrive, and have their habitats protected within parts of the Peruvian Amazon.
Legal rights for bees. How does that work in practice?
It essentially empowers the local indigenous communities who have long traditions of managing and conserving these bees to take legal action against threats. They can now use this legal standing to fight deforestation, challenge illegal logging operations that destroy the bees' nesting sites, and push back against other activities linked to climate change that harm the ecosystem the bees depend on.
Why are these stingless bees so important ecologically?
They are incredibly important pollinators. They're responsible for pollinating a huge percentage, maybe over 75% of the native plants and agricultural crops in their regions. Protecting them isn't just about the bees themselves, it's about maintaining the biodiversity and the overall health and resilience of the Amazon rainforest ecosystem. This is especially vital given the other threats the region faces.
And that brings us to those other threats. There's a major report highlighting the terrifying reach of organized crime across the Amazon basin.
It's a deeply concerning report. It found that organized crime groups involved in everything from sophisticated drug trafficking and illegal gold mining to large-scale illegal logging have established a significant presence in a staggering 67% of municipalities across 6 Amazonian countries.
67%. Which countries are we talking about?
Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela. Basically across the vast majority of the Amazon region. This isn't just petty crime. These are powerful syndicates. Their activities are driving deforestation, polluting rivers with mercury from mining, and tragically fueling violence. Homicide rates in these affected municipalities are often far above the national averages for these countries.
So crime is actively destabilizing one of the world's most critical ecosystems.
Absolutely. It's corrupting local governance, militarizing conservation areas, and creating a climate of fear that undermines efforts to protect both the environment and the indigenous communities living there. It's a complex crisis where environmental destruction and criminal violence are deeply intertwined.
From the Amazon underworld to a very different kind of crime scene. The Louvre Museum in Paris. There was a major heist.
A shocking one, yes. Crown jewels, reportedly valued at around $88 million, were stolen from the Louvre. It's a huge security failure for one of the world's most famous museums.
88 million euros. How did that happen?
The details are still emerging, but the museum's director, Laurence Descartes, had to testify before the French Senate about it. She admitted that the security camera coverage in certain key areas was insufficient and confirmed that she had offered her resignation over the incident. though it wasn't immediately accepted. It raises serious questions about how well priceless cultural heritage is being protected, even in major national institutions.
Yeah, insufficient cameras at the Louvre seems hard to believe. Okay, shifting to the U.S., there's controversy surrounding federal law enforcement actions, specifically ICE immigration and customs enforcement conducting sweeps in Manhattan's Chinatown.
That's right. Federal ICE agents carried out operations in Chinatown and New York City, ostensibly targeting street vendors selling counterfeit luxury goods, which is quite common along Canal Street there.
Okay, targeting counterfeit goods. What was the controversy?
The way the sweeps were conducted reportedly caused chaos and significant fear within the community. Local leaders and civil rights groups strongly criticized the agency, accusing them of using overly aggressive, militarized tactics against what are often vulnerable immigrant vendors, and sometimes even impacting American citizens just trying to shop or run small businesses. The debate is around proportionality, federal overreach, and the impact of these kinds of enforcement actions on community trust and civil liberties.
A complex issue. Okay, let's touch on a few health and wellness insights before we wrap up, starting with a really tragic story from the UK's mental health system.
Yes, a coroner's report delivered a absolutely scathing indictment of the care provided at a mental health unit, describing the situation leading to the death of a patient, Ceres Lupton-Jones, as a shambles.
A shambles. What went wrong?
The investigation found that staff had repeatedly skipped mandatory safety checks that were specifically designed to protect vulnerable patients like Mrs. Lupton-Jones. Even worse, they apparently falsified records to cover this up, assuring senior staff she was safe when she wasn't being properly monitored. The coroner concluded her death was entirely preventable, highlighting systemic failures in staffing, supervision, and basic protocols within that facility.
Just devastating negligence. On a much lighter note, but still practical health advice, new guidance on dealing with chronic constipation. It's not just about fiber.
Apparently not just any fiber. New research suggests that for people suffering from chronic constipation, simply upping general dietary fiber might not be the most effective approach. The study found that certain specific foods demonstrated better results.
Like what?
Kiwi fruit, rye bread, and certain types of mineral water rich in magnesium and sulfates seem to be particularly effective in improving regularity and easing symptoms, more so than just generic fiber supplements or advice to eat more fiber. It suggests a need for more targeted, evidence-based dietary recommendations focusing on specific food compounds and their mechanisms, rather than just bulk fiber.
Interesting. Kiwi fruit and rye bread. Good to know. Another health item impacting many people and employers, the cost of new weight loss drugs.
Yes, the drugs known as GLP-1 agonists, you probably know the brand names like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, are becoming incredibly popular not just for diabetes management, but also for weight loss in people who qualify.
They're very effective, reportedly.
Highly effective for many people, but they're also very expensive. As more and more employees are prescribed these medications, employers who provide health insurance are facing significant increases in their overall healthcare spending. It's creating real challenges for companies trying to manage benefits costs, leading to difficult decisions about coverage levels and employee contributions for these popular but pricey therapies.
A big cost driver, for sure. And one final positive health note, a cancer breakthrough for certain prostate cancer patients.
Yes, this is a significant development in personalized cancer treatment. A clinical trial found that combining a targeted drug called niraparib with standard hormone therapy significantly delayed the progression of prostate cancer in patients whose tumors have specific mutations in the BRCA genes.
BRCA mutations, aren't those usually associated with breast and ovarian cancer?
They are most famous for that link, yes. But BRCA gene mutations can occur in other cancers too, including prostate cancer. These mutations impair the cancer cell's ability to repair its own damaged DNA.
Okay, and what does niraparib do?
Niraparib is what's called a PRP inhibitor. PRP is another pathway cells use to repair DNA. So in cancer cells that already have faulty BRCA repair, blocking the PRP pathway with niraparib basically deals a double blow. It cripples the cancer cell's ability to fix itself, making it much more likely to die. This combination therapy exploits that specific genetic vulnerability in the tumor.
Targeted therapy based on genetics. That's really the cutting edge. Okay, to finish off, let's briefly revisit the theme of accountability, which seems fragile in some areas. Back to the UK, that inquiry into historical grooming gangs seems to be in trouble.
It's facing a serious crisis of confidence, yes. A fourth survivor of abuse has now quit the inquiries panel, and a very high-profile expert, Jim Gamble, who used to lead the UK's Child Protection Agency, also resigned.
Why are they quitting?
They've both cited deep concerns about the inquiry's direction. They worry it's becoming politicized, used for point scoring, and most alarmingly, they fear a potential cover-up aimed at protecting certain institutions or individuals from full scrutiny. The Home Secretary insists the inquiry won't be watered down, but losing key survivor voices and independent experts like Gamble severely damages its credibility and the prospect of it delivering meaningful justice and accountability.
A major setback for a crucial process. And finally, across the channel in France, a different kind of accountability seems to be playing out.
Yes, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has actually begun serving a prison sentence. This follows his conviction on corruption charges dating back to his time in office.
A former president actually going to prison.
Indeed. He's serving it under specific conditions, likely electronic monitoring at home initially, but it's still a formal prison sentence being enacted. It's seen as a landmark moment in France, reinforcing the principle that no one, not even a former head of state, is above the law. It fuels ongoing debates there about political ethics, justice, and holding powerful figures accountable for their actions. #tagoutro.
Well, we have covered a huge amount of ground today, an incredible spectrum of global forces at play. We saw how technological leaps like these new AI-powered browsers and the ongoing development of AI itself bring both amazing possibilities and really significant risks, misinformation, job losses.
Definitely. And we saw the stark complexities in global hotspots, the extreme fragility of the Gaza ceasefire, the stalled, almost icy diplomatic situation between the U.S. and Russia under President Trump and President Putin.
And we even saw how climate change is literally redrawing maps, allowing mosquitoes into Iceland, a place they've never been before.
Yeah.
Just incredible shifts happening everywhere.
You know, if there's one thread connecting almost all of these stories, from space exploration tech to market volatility to geopolitics, it seems to be this fundamental global wrestling match over control and autonomy.
Control of what, specifically?
Control of the digital space, control of information flows, control over regional military power, control over vital resources like rare earths, and maybe most fundamentally, control over economic systems and financial pathways.
So, thinking about that, what does it all mean for the future? Where is this heading? We talked quite a bit about Brazil's PIX system, this state-backed instant payment network, and the immediate strong reaction from the U.S. tariffs, sanctions. It really makes you wonder.
It really does. It strongly suggests that the next major arena for global power competition might not just be about who has the most advanced fighter jets or the biggest reserves of oil. It could very well be fought over the underlying architecture of how money moves around the world.
The plumbing of global finance, as you called it.
Exactly. As governments, especially outside the traditional Western bloc, actively explore digital sovereignty through systems like PIX or alternative networks like BRICS, they're looking for ways to operate outside the dollar-centric system. This raises a huge question for all of us, for you listening.
Which is?
If the global financial system starts to fracture along these geopolitical lines with competing state-backed digital currency zones or payment networks, what does that mean for individual users? How much control will you actually retain over your own money? Will the simple act of transferring value digitally become the new front line in a global battle between economic empires?
That is definitely something to chew on, especially as you navigate that $500 billion AI market hype and maybe reconsider paying over £5 for that carton of orange juice.
Indeed. Lots to think about.
It certainly is. We'll leave you with that thought. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.